All right, good evening, everyone. My name is Scott Leune, in case you haven't been on one of our previous webinars, and I'm looking forward to this particular webinar because it's one of the areas I'm pretty passionate about when it comes to what we've done in the past and how we've addressed building brand new practices or expanding practices or modifying practices. So in this webinar, we are going to be talking about the impact of interior design on the patient's experience, something that, as we teach in a bunch of our events, is insanely important in building a new practice. Before we get started with the presentation, I want to make sure everyone knows there's a chat box. You can post any questions you have in the chat box, and we will do our best to answer those questions during the webinar. And if we don't get to them during, we'll answer the question at the very end. Also, be sure to stay until the end so that you are able to get some contact information you need, as well as some specials we've got your way to save money on future events. All right, so let's dive into tonight's webinar. We've got Chris Robba, the founder of Leune Dental Design. Leune Dental Design is a design firm that designs practices nationwide, including even in Canada, including in Europe, and they are the only design firm that follows the methodologies that we teach and that we use to build and to coach all the dentist building startups inside of our organization. So Chris, I want to thank you for joining us tonight, and I am going to hand over the controls to you. So it's all you.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Scott, for the introduction. Thank you, everybody, for joining us this evening. I appreciate you taking the time to listen to our presentation. As Scott mentioned, I'm going to be talking about interior design and its impact on the patient experience. So before I get started, I want to kind of give you a quick overview. We're going to talk about what interior design is, try to relate it to some things that we experience on a daily type basis, apply it to the dental side of things, and kind of explain to you how you can execute interior design on your project. So first, let's talk about kind of defining what interior design is. So interior design, I'm going to read this definition and kind of break it down for you. Interior design is the professional practice of creating and planning interior environments that have a direct effect on how a person experiences a space. It involves the thoughtful selection and arrangement of elements like materials, furniture, lighting, and colors to create a functional and aesthetically pleasing space that promotes comfort and trust. So what that essentially means is that true interior design involves a professional helping you plan your space with thoughtful selections of materials, furniture, lighting, and colors, which gives you a comfortable, trustworthy space. So I put on this slide a little color wheel here. I want to just share this with you guys to try to explain to you that part of interior design actually does involve some science. And this particular case is called the psychology of colors. So certain colors invoke certain types of emotions. So that's something that a professional would know. So when you're branding and creating your space, that's all part of the interior design process. So something like color shouldn't be taken for granted. It's actually very important when you're developing your space. Okay, so from here, I'm going to dive into something that I think is something we all can relate to, and that is the restaurant experience. So I'm going to kind of walk you through something we've all experienced in our lives when you walk into a restaurant. So when you walk into a restaurant, you essentially experience first the ambiance of the restaurant. When you walk in, the person who has designed that restaurant has done it in a way with the lighting is done in a very specific way. The host stand is in a very specific spot. Everything is done in a way to make your experience be tailored to what they want it to be. So when you walk into a restaurant, you walk up to the hostess, the sounds, the smells, all those things are part of the experience that you're experiencing as you go through that restaurant experience. As you go through that, you walk over to your table. As you're walking to the table, you may even see the chef in the kitchen. It may be an open kitchen design. So the designer has thought about putting the kitchen in a spot that works with the restaurant layout, which gives the chef a view of the whole restaurant, also gives the people visiting the restaurant a view of the kitchen. Once again, it's all part of the experience. These are all things that are thought through, and they're all planned, they're all intentional. They're not just, they don't happen by circumstance. As you sit down at your table, you're greeted now by your server. The server comes over, they speak to you a certain way, they have a certain presentation, they may be dressed a certain way, they give you a menu to choose from. You select your food, you select your drinks. All of these things have been tailored, they're all part of the design experience. Even your food has been designed in a way, your cocktail and food. So food tastes as good as it looks, but these days that's a big part of the process. If you go to restaurants, people always have their phones out taking pictures of their food. So as you kind of continue on with that experience, if everything's going well, you may also have the manager come to your table and come see how you're doing, see how your experience is going, which further promotes the experience. Hopefully you're not giving them a bad look like this picture I picked. I'm sorry, it's all I could find for a manager. They're frowning at him. But the whole thing is that from start to finish, your experience has been tailored from the lighting, from the furniture, from the colors on the wall, from the flooring, the sounds, the smells, everything is all part of your restaurant experience. And hopefully, if it's a good experience, you'll go online and you'll leave them a good review, which other people will use to help decide whether to go there or not. This same philosophy and approach can be applied to a dental practice. Now, if you were in a restaurant having an amazing experience as you walked in and you went into the restroom, which I've put in the top right corner, and the restroom looks like I've shown here, it's going to make you start questioning other parts of the restaurant. Is the kitchen clean? Are they taking care of the food in the back? You start to question things. Now, if there's something that's not perfect or something that's out of place, because of that experience in that badly designed restroom, you start questioning other things. You may not be as willing to forgive mistakes or things that aren't going according to plan. So it's not about doing one thing right. It's about doing everything right. Now, in a dental practice, you could have an amazing doctor. You could have an all-star team. And you could have all the latest technology. All those things could be perfectly planned and perfectly executed. But if your reception and your operatories look like some of these examples, there could be a huge disconnect that can affect your patient's experience and can affect them coming back or even recommending it to other people.
Yeah, Chris, I'm thinking back to one time where my daughter had to have this surgery that had kind of cosmetic complications involved. And so we had to go find a surgeon that could perform the surgery and make sure that, everything looked correct at the end of surgery. And it was a very difficult thing for us to go through, to having a daughter that needed kind of reconstructive surgery and things like that. And we were recommended to the top surgeon in our area. And I remember walking in and sitting in a lobby that looked like these photos, thinking to myself, how can we trust this surgeon to make decisions about the cosmetic outcome of my daughter if they can't make the correct decisions about the color or the materials, the finishes in their lobby? And I just couldn't help but judge the surgeon based on the lobby. And I'm in the medical and dental field and understand, all technology and skill and things like that. And I still got sucked into wondering, I don't know if I can trust this guy, because look at this place. Would the same person that could do amazing work decide to make these decisions about the lobby?
Right. And what's interesting about that is that this is something that's changed over time. So we've had clients in the past that have come to us with existing practices that are actually performing pretty well. And they've said, why do I need to update my reception? I'm doing well, everything's great. And the reality is that, the old days, ignorance was bliss. You would go to your dental office or your doctor, your GP, whatever it may be. All you knew was that practice. Now, because of social media and because of things like Instagram, TikTok, Google, all these tools that are out there, you're seeing other dental practices on an almost constant basis. So if you're in a practice that is dated, yet successful in some ways, it can't keep up with everybody else. You're competing with people in a way that you can't compete. And so you need to update your practice in order to compete with those other offices.
Yeah, I'm sorry to interrupt you again, but another thought is that these other offices aren't competing with us just for the patient. These other offices are competing with us for the team. And I'm thinking of one of our coaching clients right now who's got a gorgeous, really well-designed office. And they are inundated with people asking if they could work there. So much so that this dentist had to make an official social media post that said, please stop sending us your resumes. Everyone wanted to work there because everyone wanted to work in a beautiful professional environment, an environment that kind of represented the quality of the dentistry, the quality of what it's like to work there, the quality of what it's like to be a patient there. So this goes deep, I think, deep into more than just do my current patients care. Hey, Chris, are you there?
Yeah, I lost you for a second. Yeah, no, I totally agree. And that's definitely part of the design process as well. Whenever you're designing your practice from an interior design perspective, obviously you're considering your patients, but you're also considering your staff. Your staff is in that space more than anyone. And so having an environment that is comfortable and is relaxing, the lighting, the colors, everything makes it a comfortable environment. It's obviously going to make it a happier place to work for your staff. So what we're shooting for on the dental side of things are spaces like I'm showing here on this slide. So each one of these practices are in different parts of the country, and they're all completely different in different ways, depending on where they're located or even the type of dentistry that the dentist is practicing. So for example, the slide in the very middle on the top, that is a practice in Louisiana, kind of like in a rural area. The doctor was in hunting. So a lot of the colors, a lot of the architectural features kind of are geared towards that sort of a setup. The practice on the middle right, that's in Florida, located over a lake. They wanted a kind of like a home type feel from inside looking out to the lake. So every single piece, every material, every piece of furniture, the color of the rug, the lights, everything is critical to execute that vision in a way that the patient knows what you're intending and they're not confused as to whatever your concept may be. And that obviously applies not just to the reception, it applies to the patient corridor, it applies to the operatories. It even honestly applies in many ways to the sterilization area when it comes to your staff. Things looking nice, organized, and clean is going to have them behave in that exact same way that you designed it for them. So the question is, who provides the interior design? You essentially have two options when it comes to interior design. The first option is to work with an interior designer. So it's important to understand what an interior designer is. An interior designer is a person who has attended a school for design, have gotten a degree in interior design. Typically, it's a 4-year program. Sometimes it's 2 if you have an existing bachelor's degree. They have to work for 2 years under a licensed interior designer. And if they choose to become licensed, if they choose to actually stamp the plans, which is not necessary on all projects, they have to take and pass the NCIDQ exam. Another thing that makes an interior designer unique is that they do have experience in understanding of space planning, and they also understand architectural details. Architectural details are very important because if you, for example, ask for a certain type of check-in desk, let's say you want to do what's called a waterfall at your front desk, where the material just cascades over the edge. That does require a drawing or some sort of detail so that your contractor can price it and build it. Without that detail, you're putting too much power in the contractor's hand. You may overpay or not get what you're hoping to get. Another option is working with an interior decorator. So an interior decorator doesn't necessarily have to have an educational background in design, but they typically have experience working in the design industry, usually working with maybe for a furniture company or some other type of entity that practices design, whether it be carpet, wall coverings, things like that. They are not typically gifted when it comes to space planning, not because they don't want to, just typically because they're typically picking colors, furnitures, and things like that. They rarely will provide you any details on the drawings. That's where it's going to kind of be a risky thing if you go that direction on the interior decorator side.
So would it be safe to say that like an interior decorator focuses a lot on picking furniture and art and decorations and maybe color and helping with some of the finishes selections like light fixtures and flooring, where an interior designer has been very formally trained in that stuff, does all of that stuff, but in addition can design cabinetry, design beams or kind of details of a room to give it a lot more interest and make all the drawings so that the architect, the contractor, the cabinet company, everyone knows exactly what they intend. Did I say that correctly?
Yeah, that's perfectly said. That's the exact difference. Now, both of these different options, they do have access to all the materials, which is really important. It's important to know that a professional in this field knows what's available, knows what materials are best, knows the pros and cons of those materials. They're also educated with the trends in design, which is very important. When you're doing your interior design, you want to try to stay away from something that's temporary as far as a trend. You don't want your office to look relevant for a year. You want your office to look relevant for a good amount of time. Cost effective when it comes to a remodel type project. So it's important to know that an interior design option, as far as working exclusively with an interior designer, is really best utilized if you're doing a remodel type project versus a full scale, like new build or new construction type project.
So would an interior designer also understand kind of what material costs are or some aspects of budgeting, so that when we as a dentist are kind of coming up with our different ideas, they can educate us up front about the cost differences?
Absolutely. And that's something that you should be super strict and disciplined on, especially in today's market with the cost of construction being so high. If you do not have a budget and stick to those numbers and communicate that to your interior designer, you're basically setting yourself up for a little bit of disappointment down the road. And we'll be covering that in the future slide.
Is it also possible that the interior designer is able to think of things we didn't think of to save us money? In other words, could they sometimes earn their keep? If I have to pay them, of course, to be an interior designer, can they save me an equal amount of money?
Absolutely. Yeah, they can definitely save you. And the way they typically do that is that they take whatever your vision may be, even if you may have a certain thing you want to do, and they'll show you what it is to do that thing and give you an alternate way to achieve the same outcome for a more cost-effective approach. So the question as far as when do you start the interior design process? And the answer to that is immediately. So the first way you can start doing that, even right now as you're planning your office, even if it may be several years out, is to create a Pinterest board. So by creating a Pinterest board, you can throw into your board anything you see, whether it be online, if you're out in public, anywhere you are, any colors, light fixtures, furniture, you just throw it into your Pinterest board. That's going to help keep all of your different inspirations all in one space, so that when you do work with your interior designer, they're able to see what you're visualizing things, so they can actually support it in a way that they can see it on paper. If you're trying to verbalize to your interior designer what you want, it's very, very difficult to verbalize. Having a Pinterest board is the best way to approach that first part of the design process. Once you've established what you want to do and you've identified a space, it's very important that you hire an architect and start designing your practice. That is the first step before you start picking flooring or any of those other types of things with interior design. You first need to design your space, lay everything out in the most efficient way possible, make sure you're maximizing the number of operatories you have in your space, make sure it's designed in a way that's efficient for your staff, make sure it flows well for your patients. Once you've established that initial floor plan, that is when you will bring the interior designer into the process with that floor plan, and then they start essentially painting that plan based on the things that you want to be in it: the flooring, the walls, the laminate, solid surface, light fixtures. They bring all those details into the floor plan design. All of that is put onto what we call the construction documents. This is an example of a project we're doing right now in Georgia. They are going for a French chateau look. So as you'll see on these sheets, everything here is showing the colors that they've selected. It's showing the type of light fixtures they've selected. It shows even the detail of the crown molding that they've selected. It has everything called out, spelled out, where the contractor can take all this information, they can price it, and then when they're constructing it, they'll use these sheets as well as a guide as they're constructing things, with the intent that when they finish constructing it, that it resembles these renderings you're seeing on these sheets here.
Yeah, and these renderings, is this kind of a mock-up, or are these actual photos of other offices? How are these renderings created?
So these are actual 3D renderings. So once we finish the floor plan on the architectural side, the interior designer is going to take our model, which is a 3D model, and they're going to put, we call it skin. They're going to put skin on the model. So the skin is going to be the type of wall material you pick, the type of flooring you pick, and then other details into that particular space. So these are all computer-generated renderings of the practice that is going to be eventually built and hopefully looking just like you're seeing on the screen right now.
And I can't imagine, like, I'm a dentist, I'm building an office, which may be the very biggest dollar thing I ever do. I'm going to build this thing. I've got to work in, I've got to get patients to say yes to my dentistry. I've got to retain staff. And I can't imagine doing this without a professional showing me things I didn't realize helping me save money, coming up with beautiful designs like this. I just can't imagine. What do people typically do when they don't have an interior designer? Well, how does that work?
Yep. So we've had that experience in the past where we have clients that they choose not to involve an interior designer, and either on their own they've decided to pick their own colors, or they've relied on the contractor. What that usually results in is a space that does not meet their expectations. It's very difficult to see that from our perspective because we know where it's going, but obviously it's, they can choose whatever they want to do. But that's usually the outcome. The other potential outcome of that too is also them spending more than they need to spend, because they're almost testing things out on the fly. So you'll see on jobs like that, they're painting walls several times, they're changing out materials. It turns into a more costly direction and also takes more time.
So they think they want a medium gray, and then the contractor paints half the office in medium gray, and they're like, oh, I don't like this, it needs to be lighter, and then they have to repaint it all over again, and then they're like, no, now I don't like how it matches with the flooring, I think we need to change some of the baseboards or whatever. Is that what you're describing?
That's exactly what happens. Yep.
Oh God. Okay. Well, this is gorgeous. These renderings are gorgeous.
Yeah, thank you. So this last sheet, I want to just kind of explain to you this as well. So the detail is so detailed that you can break it down room by room. So each room has a finish schedule. It explains each wall's paint color. It explains the type of ceiling it has, the type of flooring it has. It explains the type of cove base it has. If there's crown molding, it explains the crown molding. All that detail is in the plans. When you give a contractor detail, even though it's possible they still may mess up, there's just a higher probability it's going to be executed the way you want it to be when you give them detail. We even also on these detail sheets provide a furniture plan. So as you're going through the interior design process and you're selecting your colors and your finishes, you'll also be getting assistance selecting furniture. Now that is something that's very important to understand as part of the process, because selecting furniture is not something that should be taken lightly. First of all, it's important to know when you select furniture that whatever you select should be ordered at least 6 weeks before you start construction, or no later than the start of construction. Sometimes furniture can take 12 to 18 weeks for it to actually be shipped to your site. And if you open without furniture, you've got a major problem on your hands. So I would recommend that you select your furniture as quickly as you can, order it, and then have it shipped either to your residence or somewhere you can store it until you can put it into your practice, versus trying to get it towards the end of the project.
Now, do interior designers, because they're dealing so much with different materials and different furniture, lighting fixtures and so forth, do they also have kind of preferred pricing that they can introduce for a dentist to maybe, buy some plumbing fixtures at a discount?
They do. So typically interior designers do get discounts from some manufacturers. I will tell you that it's usually from high-end manufacturers. So you're not going to be getting discount, from furniture like on Wayfair. You'll be getting discount from something like maybe Ansac Tile that's like $20 a square foot. You'll get a discount on that. So, but it is available to you working with an interior designer, a licensed interior designer, to get those discounts.
Okay, and so just to put this into perspective, if I'm building out, let's just say a 2,500 square foot dental office, at just the construction side alone, I know this is a loaded question, but if I wanted to build something like what we're seeing in these renderings, like what might be kind of a range or cost for that? What is my construction budget for something that size?
So for the practice we're looking at right now, looking at as a whole, and remember as a whole, we're talking about the entire practice. So that's not just the finishes. It involves all the mechanical, the plumbing, electrical. You're looking at probably around $275 a square foot.
So this could easily be $600,000, $700,000, $800,000 construction project at that size. And obviously, in our startup seminars, we talk about how to shave a couple $100,000 off of that and still have something beautiful. But even if we are successful at managing a budget at a lower number, we're still talking about at least $500,000 of decisions that we're making to build this thing. Did I say that correctly?
That's correct. That's correct.
So if I'm doing this, then I need an architect to design the layout or the floor plan. and then bring an interior designer in, hopefully like a licensed interior designer that can help me paint this, skin this, make it beautiful and gorgeous. And then the architect is going to be creating all of the architectural drawings, mechanical, electrical, and plumbing, and all the saw cutting, and maybe even a bunch of the cabinet diagrams, and submitting that whole packet to the contractors for bidding, and
Correct.
eventually, of course, to the city for permitting, so we could start the process. Did I say that correctly?
That's correct. And that's the next phase of this whole process, is going to be the bidding and construction phase. So once you've completed working with the interior designer and the architect and the engineer has completed their plans, you're going to then be releasing the plans, which is called an invitation to bid. You're going to send out an invitation to bid to 4 to 5. We recommend 4 to 5 contractors to bid on a project. They're all going to be bidding the exact same information. So by doing this, you're going to get numbers that are aligned with the exact same work scope. Now, once you've hired the contractor, and I will tell you, in today's market, every single project we're working on right now, we're having to do what's called VE, which is called value engineering. So we're having to take a project we've designed, and we're having to go through it and find detail and find areas that if we tweak, change, or modify in some way, is going to yield some sort of positive gain on the project and save money. So this exercise is something that should not be taken lightly and needs to be overseen by the architect and the interior designer. If you allow the contractor to be the person who is just making these decisions, they're going to take things out which save you money, but give you a final product that looks like what we talked about, a person not hiring anyone at all. It's going to just be a very plain Jane, boring practice with no character, none of those things you want to be in the practice. And so it's really important that the architect and interior designer is a part of that process. I'm showing right here an example of a typical bid sheet. And on this particular job, we've highlighted in yellow some items that the contractor is recommending that we take out of the project in order to save money. So for example, we have in our project doors with glass, and they're saying we take out the glass, you're going to save X amount of dollars. We have what we call the cloud feature, which is typically wrapped in laminate. They're saying take off the laminate and paint it. So while some of these are good suggestions, it's important that someone from a design side is looking and approving these things before you agree to them, so that you have something at the end that looks close to what you hope for it to be. Now, there's also another way to approach this as well. You may sometimes hold and wait on some of the finishes that you want to install. So you may paint a wall temporarily until you put up wall covering or put up a 3D wall panel or some sort of architectural feature in the future. But you have to at least plan for those things in advance and make sure that everything's in place to do that in the future for you.
So I guess it sounds like a contractor kind of wants to, make things easier to build and more simple, and cut out things so that your budget goes down and they're still maintaining a great margin. But the result of that could be a space that's not beautiful. It's not anything like what we actually thought it would end up being. Whereas the architect and the interior designer are kind of trying to create the beauty and fit inside the budget. And so you kind of have this team approach that has to happen so that we've got these balances, and it's all controlled by the umbrella of the budget. Did I say that correctly?
Yep, that's exactly right. And it's a dance. Everyone is pulling and pushing in different directions, but someone has to be looking out for the best interest of the doctor. And that's where the architect and the interior designer come in, because we want what we've created, the vision we've created together, to be executed.
And without that dance, we end up one-sided. We end up either like way too ugly, or way too expensive, or way too complicated. We don't end up with the right balance, which is embarrassing. How many dentists build practices without the proper planning and without the professionals helping them? It's just crazy to me.
That's right. Now, ultimately, all of this will result in these different examples I've shared with you below. These are different practices all over the country. Some of them are outside the country. And you can see they're all different colors, different furniture, different lighting, different feels. And it's all very specific to what you want the space to be. An interior designer or an architect should never force on you what their vision is. It's your vision for your space. That's something I do hear a lot from a lot of clients we work with. They come to us after they've worked with someone else, is that the person they were working with was basically trying to design their space, how they saw it and how they wanted it to be. That's not how it's supposed to be. You're supposed to be working with the professional to guide you and help execute in your mind, what your vision is, and put it on paper, not put what's in their mind and their vision on paper for you.
And, if you were to hire an interior designer, first of all, how much does that cost? What's kind of a range? What should we expect?
So an interior designer, it kind of depends on the scope, but it could be, $12,000 to $15,000 working exclusively with an interior designer. In that particular case, they're going to be providing to you a lot of detail, lots of information. It's going to be pretty much a turnkey type process with them, but it's really going to be dependent upon sometimes the amount of work they're doing and also the size of the space.
So if it's 12,000, that represents less than 2% of the entire project cost of building a startup practice, for example. So for less than 2%, we have a professional interior designer guiding us through materials, guiding us through all of these decisions, helping us save money because they think of better ways to do it that don't cost as much, helping us get discounts. Do you think that an interior designer would frequently find $12,000 of savings because we work
I think it's very possible for them to find the savings. They're also saving you time, because what happens during construction, especially in today's world, is that materials aren't often available. And so you'll have to, right in the middle of the project, have to pivot to another product or another material. And the time it takes you to make that pivot and make that decision is going to affect your overall project schedule. And so that time costs money as well. So they're working with you in the beginning, the middle, and also throughout the whole construction process.
So a dentist that doesn't have this organization, that doesn't have an interior designer, architect helping them, when the contractor is constantly waiting on the dentist to make the next set of decisions and make changes, and then they got to order materials and there's a delay, how much delay time can this add up to?
So you could easily lose a month very quickly while you're meddling back and forth on material changes and things like that. It could easily cost you a month.
So in rent, a small dental practice in Class A real estate today is going to be spending, $6,000, $7,000 a month in rent. So if it costs us a month, for many dentists, that means it cost us one of our free months of rent. In other words, we're going to get hit with $6,000 or $7,000 of extra rent cost now. So right there, that's already paid for half of the interior designer, not including, of course, the other savings and the other value that they bring. Another question, Chris, where do we find interior designers?
So in finding an interior designer, there's a couple ways you can do it. Obviously, you can check the area that you live in, but the reality in today's world is that you can work with interior designers from all over the world. They don't have to be in your particular market. So what I recommend you do is kind of do a search under interior design and / dental, and from there you can kind of narrow down some options. We obviously work with some interior designers ourselves that we can recommend to you, that we've worked with and have experiences with. And that's an important part too, is to talk to someone who's actually worked with the interior designer. Some interior designers are extremely talented, but they don't execute. And so it's important that you're getting not just the talent, but you're also getting the execution, because like you just mentioned, while they can help save you time, they can also cost you time. So you really need to make sure you're working with the right person that fits your expectations. You understand what they're going to deliver to you in a timely manner, and that they're all part of the team and understand what's expected of them.
Would it be safe to say that some interior designers don't really have a care about what the budget is? They typically just over-design things. Would that be safe to say?
That's unfortunately more common than it should be, which is why we work with certain interior designers, because they understand what we're trying to do. We're trying to give our clients a beautiful practice. At the same time, though, we're not trying to create something that's way too expensive.
So,
it's actually
my opinion on this is that the best way to find an interior designer is through your architect, because that means that this is an interior designer that does good work. They execute on it on the timeline needed. The customer service is good, and that the cost doesn't get out of hand. Because if any of those things are broken, it also puts pressure on the architect to then have to fix it. So if you as an architect are working with some rogue interior designer and they're breaking some of these things, you're having to work harder and deal with more problems. Is that correct?
That is exactly correct. I'll give you a quick example. We had a project recently working with a designer, actually interior decorator. We never met before. And because of some of the information that was provided, it wasn't detailed enough. There wasn't enough information. It created delays. We had to do more work on our side to kind of fill in some of the gaps. And the process does not go smoothly when you're not working with the right fit when it comes to that. So it is definitely important to work with people that you've worked with in the past.
I've also met interior designers that I feel like made their living in the first half of the career decorating old ladies' houses. Everything is just not, at least what my vision would be. So Chris, if I'm using, Leune Dental Design as an architecture firm and you're connecting me with some interior designers that you've worked with, they've all been vetted and you've got a relationship with them. And so you're able to put your name kind of behind them a bit. And then I would pick the one that I feel can create my style, my vision the best. Did I say that right?
Yep, that's correct. And often sometimes we'll even kind of tell you, who we work with kind of best fits what you've described. Like on the practice that I just shared with you, based on what they described they wanted, I knew which interior designer kind of best fit that particular style. And so we can also recommend it from the other way as well.
Yeah, I'm going to click backwards just a little bit. So what we're looking at in this photo, this is gorgeous, by the way. This office, this whole kind of beige on gray color scheme is very in. Painting paneling and painting crown and baseboard the same color as the wall is the mature way of doing it today, as opposed to what we saw 10 or 20 years ago, kind of white on gray or white on beige. This is beautiful. But if we look at this and we look at the chair and the part above the chair, the wood up on the wall and then the curve and then the part on the ceiling, that was all created by an interior designer, or was that created by the architect? Or who comes up with that design?
So in this particular case, the interior designer is the one that's recommending that. And then on the architectural side, we have to show that in the plan so that the contractor can build it. So it's a collaboration. On this project, it came from the interior designer.
And what about, if I go back a slide, we've got like the herringbone look on the floor and the arches in the doorways. And if we look on the right side, we've got kind of this, I guess this is probably a patient corridor, hallway detail jutting out a little bit. Like, who designed the piece to jut out? Who designed the arches? Who designed the herringbone? Where did that come from?
That's all interior design. So they're taking what we created from a space plan, from a floor plan, as far as defining the space, and they're adding on those details.
So if we look at the photo on the bottom left and the top left, if this had not been an interior designer, we might see flat, plain walls of a color that's not as mature. We might not see light fixtures that make sense. The flooring might be pretty general, generic. The furniture may be more clinical feel. There may not be any beams whatsoever, no kind of detail like this. It would be a completely different feeling office. Whereas when I walk into this, I can trust this practice with a big case of mine. I can trust this practice to have clean billing, to be utilizing modern equipment. Like when I have to make a decision about, like, do I say yes to treatment, I'm going to feel like I'm in one of the best spots when I walk into this. And the only difference in that story, in that hypothetical, was the interior design.
Right.
Do you have any other things that you've seen lately on interior design? Any kind of things that you're like, wow, that really came out well, or different ideas that are not maybe normal in dental offices, but you've seen them used and you're like, man, this is something that, would look good in a lot of dental offices. Is there anything that comes to mind?
We're starting to see a lot more use of, when it comes to stone, not so much using granite, but using a lot of man-made stone. On the, like I mentioned, the waterfall effect, that's really popular right now and is very beautiful, executed, can be done very nicely. It is difficult to use glass because it's very expensive, but we're seeing creative ways of using glass where maybe it's not large pieces of glass, use glasses in segments and things like that, so you can create the transparency. I'm also seeing, as far as flooring goes, We initially would only see LVT, which is luxury vinyl tile in practices. We're seeing lots of practices doing a combination of vinyl and even polished concrete. So that's a nice little trend. Also, open ceilings, having nice wide open ceilings. That's going to create an open feel, but also it can save you some money not having those ceilings if you want to go with like an industrial type look. So really having an idea of the style you want to do and kind of the look you want to have is going to kind of point the designer in the direction to make those recommendations to you.
When you say polished concrete, are you talking about like the very thin layer of concrete poured on top, or are you talking about polishing the actual slab?
You polish the slab. So if you go like to Home Depot or you walk into another type of business like that, typically what they're doing, they're taking the existing concrete slab, they get a diamond pad and they just grind down that layer and polish it where it has a sheen on it. That's polished concrete.
What about on kind of the seamless, like epoxy flooring look that could even go up the wall a little bit? Is that something that you see in dental offices?
That's actually very common in an ER, like a medical type setting. You're actually required to have a continuous flooring up the side. So you don't see that as much on the dental. It is a little expensive because it's a pour in place type material, but you could definitely do that and maybe like in controlled areas to kind of get the cost down, but kind of get some wow in certain spots.
Yeah, so like operators, for example, could have like some beautiful white style, like marble kind of styled look where it's epoxy coming up without a seam. So the dental chairs aren't like hopping over seams and the parts aren't bumping over them. You mentioned glass. So a frameless glass wall is insanely expensive.
Yep.
You said people are kind of using smaller pieces of glass. Are you talking about kind of like building a wall that's full of small windows so you can still see through it, but you don't have to call it frameless glass?
Yeah, that's right. That's kind of the workaround because as you mentioned, frameless glass is very expensive since it's basically just tempered glass. So you can take a glass wall that is normally, let's say it's like $6,000 in tempered glass. And by breaking it into smaller pieces of glass in a nice architectural way, you could cut that number easily in half. So you can,
like in this photo on the bottom left, we see what looks to be like maybe a pocket door that has these glass panels. Are you saying like a whole wall might look something like that?
Correct. Exactly right. So you can break it up by breaking it into pieces and by framing it versus it being a continuous piece of glass floor to ceiling.
Okay, excellent. Well, we are wrapping this up, Chris. I'm going to give you back the controls over the slideshow.
Okay.
You can finish that up.
Yeah. So just some kind of closing remarks or some things to think about is that you do not get a second chance to make a first impression. It's very important to think about that. So when somebody comes into your practice, that first impression that they get, and also too, when they leave the practice, they're leaving back through that first impression. So it's very important to keep in mind that a first impression is a lasting impression. And so you should not take lightly how important it is for your patient to experience what you want them to experience in a way that's positive for them so that they will share with others, which will help you execute your vision and dream of your practice.
Well, man, patients are also kind of obsessed about some of this stuff. I mean, they've got their own Pinterest boards. They follow fashion. They follow, home improvement, videos and shows and accounts and listen to podcasts. And, we're kind of in a world, the Instagram world of aesthetics. And I would imagine compared to 10 or 20 years ago, which wasn't that long ago, the bar is higher on what looks beautiful, what is respectable, what is, Pinterestable. Do you see that? I'm curious, when you work with dentists, do they get that? Or are you running into dentists that are blind to this aspect of design? Or most of them are passionate about this? What's happening right now?
I would say that up until recently, I feel like dentists as a whole are more educated about this and are more aware of it, and they're more connected to what they want. Definitely, that is the case. I'd say 4 or 5 years ago was not the case. 4 or 5 years ago, it was more us trying to convince them that they need to do it. And like I said, back then, they would most likely not do it. That was usually the decision we were talking on a project was, do you want interior design? It was more often no than yes. It was usually, no, I got it. My wife is good at selecting colors, or my husband's great at furniture. And that was usually the direction people went. Today in 2025, it's the other way. Now people they understand they need interior design. And I think it's because of what you're saying. I think in the world in general, design is more in everyone's face. Even fast food restaurants and stores that were been around, they've all rebranded and changed their look to be more design conscious. And that's definitely, we're seeing that definitely on the dental side for sure.
All right. Well, you want to take over the last couple slides?
Yep. So, hold on here. So that pretty much wraps up my presentation for on the interior design side. I just wanted to thank everyone for their time this evening to listen to it. And if you want any more additional information on what interior design is or need to take some recommendations from us, you can follow the QR code below and you'll speak to someone from our team that will be able to point you in the right direction and how we can assist you best.
Yeah, and so also we had a question pop up just now. Please, if any of you guys have any questions, now's your last chance to ask them. And we've also got a couple more slides left, so don't hop off just yet. But a question that just popped up, Chris, what is the name of the paint color used in the French chateau design? So a few slides back,
okay.
You know, the one that was done by that interior designer that was kind of the gray on gray look with the herringbone flooring. They're asking, what was the paint color used in that design? Do you happen to have that handy?
Yeah, I'll have to look it up. I'm able to email the person the exact color, but I can't zoom in on the slide. So,
okay. So if you were the one that asked that question, go to the QR code right now, connect with the QR code, and that will get you connected with Chris, and then he can look that up for you after this presentation and email it back so you've got the exact. Could you provide the different paint colors they have on those photos? Yeah, there's several.
Yeah, that's no problem. Yeah, I'll email them the information on all the different paint colors. That way and then from there, what you do is that once I give you the paint color, you can then go to like a Home Depot or Lowe's, wherever there's Sherwin-Williams. If it's a Sherwin-Williams paint color, you should actually get the paint chip. You never select the paint color based off what you see on the screen. You always need to do it off an actual sample.
Yeah. Awesome. And while we're waiting to see if there's any other questions, I'm going to flip through to the next slide here. Some of you guys have never been to our events and maybe you've heard about them. I really would encourage you to research our business training events. They're pretty intense. They're pretty well known. We're very proud of kind of how valuable we've made them, but they are intense. You will walk away with a tremendous amount of business knowledge. If you've ever thought about going, if you use this code, it will save you quite a bit of money. This might pay for, this might be enough savings to pay for your flights, your hotel. So I encourage you to go to the website, use this code if you'd like to register. We've got multiple different types of business training events for dentistry. I'm about to switch to the next slide, so write this code down if you need to. The next slide, I invite all of you guys to join me in the podcast world. We just released a new podcast a couple months ago called The Dental CEO. It's already in the top 5% of all podcasts in the world. We're getting a lot of kind of positive feedback. I encourage you to make it a daily habit of yours to listen to it. It's once a week while you drive to work. Subscribe to it. We do everything we can to make it interesting and valuable and just it's like we're talking right at different business principles. This is not some storytelling podcast or some sales pitch by any means. Chris, we had another comment here. Someone said, as an NCIDQ certified interior designer, I love that you noted the difference between designers and decorators. Thank you for sharing this info. Thank you for saying that on the chat here. I think that too many people confuse decorator versus interior designer, and then they'd say their spouse can be an interior designer, and it's just not the same thing. What we're all needing is a properly trained, experienced, qualified interior designer to help us make the practice that we are proud of, that represents the kind of dentistry we want to be known for, that is going to give us energy when we show up to work instead of us just feeling drained. It's the kind of practice where patients are taking photos of it, referring other people to it. They trust us because of it. It's the kind of practice where dental hygienists want to work and front office and dental assistants want to work. It's the kind of practice that when we post about it on Instagram, it's aesthetic, it's beautiful, and patients look and engage and respond. It's that kind of a practice, the kind of practice that represents the kind of career we want to have. And that kind of practice comes from a properly certified interior designer and an architect and both of them understand the boundaries of budget. They understand the vision of the doctor, and they understand how to do this the right way. Well, Chris, I'm going to give it back to you for one last kind of comment or thought to everyone that joined this. Is there anything else you'd like to say?
Just like I mentioned earlier, it's very important to remember, just go make a good first impression. Those are my final words.
Awesome. Well, everyone, I want to thank y'all for joining us. We have lots of other podcasts that we roll out every week or two on all kinds of different topics. It's a quick little hour. Hopefully it's convenient for you in the evening. So be sure to check out the other podcasts. I said podcasts. I meant webinars. Excuse me. Be sure to check out the other webinars. Also, here's that code again. If you do want to get training, go through our intense business training. I can see you at one of our events. Okay, everyone. I hope this was valuable to you guys. I hope that it helps you put everything into perspective and gives you kind of the next steps, the focus that you want to have, and makes you hopefully excited about what you're about to do in building a practice. Chris, I want to thank you for donating your time and allowing us to have this webinar. And everyone else, I will see you on our next webinar. Thank you so much. Bye, everyone.
Everybody. Good night.